urgent developments unfolding right now. Listen closely. The nation's capital is experiencing an extraordinary crisis as personnel inside the White House have taken the unusual step of blocking access to multiple levels, shutting down entire sections following what sources describe as former President Donald Trump, experiencing a severe outburst during what many are calling an unprecedented internal emergency situation. This is not standard protocol or regular safety procedure. Reports suggest this represents a critical reaction to what those present are characterizing as an explosive incident of massive scale. Only a few hours earlier, within the walls of America's most famous building, warning signals echoed throughout the structure while staff members and protective agents rushed to manage an unfolding crisis. At the center of this situation, Trump himself, who sources indicate was present for an important strategy session with close associates and counselors. The trigger appears connected to a significant judicial decision delivered this very morning from the nation's highest court, which rejected his most recent legal challenge in an extensive case involving sensitive government materials and allegations related to election conduct. Senior personnel made the determination during a closed emergency gathering. The court's action, which confirmed an earlier judge's demand for swift action and possible penalty charges, created immediate turmoil throughout the building's hallways. The sequence of events unfolded rapidly, with the shutdown directive reportedly given around 11:45 p.m. Eastern, taking even protective services by surprise. Anonymous individuals with direct knowledge describe scenes of disorder. Loud exchanges reverberating through passages, papers being rapidly destroyed, and Trump allegedly expressing extreme anger at the walls surrounding him, insisting on actions that nobody present could authorize. Media representatives covering the building were removed under the explanation of technical difficulties. Though information is already spreading across online platforms, with related hashtags gaining worldwide attention. This response from personnel goes beyond standard practice. Analysts believe it demonstrates that control mechanisms are breaking down. As the shutdown continues, sections containing critical operations, including secure command facilities and leadership offices, remain off limits with armed guards positioned at access points. The immediate trigger was Trump's apparent rejection of the judicial order, with reports suggesting he loudly insisted on resistance and mobilizing followers, which concerned staff sufficiently to activate internal crisis procedures normally reserved for national security dangers. In a remarkable development, this pressure is not originating from outside threats, but from within the very structure that previously supported him. The shutdown decision came from unanimous agreement among personnel on duty, made during a late evening conference where concerns about possible violence or unauthorized activities led to the action. At this moment, additional support from federal organizations is reportedly en route, highlighting the seriousness of the situation. This breaking development represents a critical breaking point in the continuing story of Trump's challenges following his presidency, where legal difficulties have now resulted in physical restriction measures. Stay with us as we examine the implications for the country. This goes far beyond routine measures. Throughout American political history, when White House personnel initiate a shutdown against a former president present in the building, it only happens when trust in that individual's judgment has completely eroded, indicating a transformation from protection to active control. Institutional responses now suggest complete frustration with preparations for forceful intervention if required to stop additional instability. What observers are witnessing is the governmental system focusing inward, handling Trump not as a distinguished visitor, but as a possible risk factor. Such measures only occur when circumstances slip beyond manageable limits, as shown by the swift establishment of barriers and communication restrictions. Making matters worse is the abandonment happening in real time. Previous supporters and Republican establishment figures are no longer defending Trump. Their silence is notable from prominent figures like Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Speaker Mike Johnson. Political leaders who previously expressed strong support are now carefully hedging with measured comments about honoring legal processes, a dramatic shift from absolute loyalty. Those with inside knowledge report private responses ranging to complete alarm, with staff creating distance through anonymous leaks and quiet departures from advisory positions. Public support has transformed into crisis management, with organizations like the Republican National Committee releasing neutral communications, calling for stability rather than passionate defenses. The political significance is unmistakable. They recognize what's approaching. A series of consequences that could destroy the entire movement infrastructure. Even long-standing confidants such as Rudy Giuliani and Steve Bannon have become completely silent on digital platforms, declining to respond despite direct questions from journalists. This critical juncture exposes divisions within Republican circles where personal survival now takes priority over loyalty. As the shutdown persists, information from Capitol Hill indicates a possible Senate uprising developing, with Republican senators privately exploring backup strategies to further separate themselves from Trump. The abandonment feels most painful from those who benefited from his influence, now viewing him as a failing enterprise. This transformation is not subtle. It represents a deliberate withdrawal, with financial backers removing support and endorsements disappearing rapidly. In the wider picture, this remarkable signal from White House staff invoking shutdown measures typically reserved for active dangers emphasizes a conviction that Trump's behavior presents an immediate threat to order. The action has triggered interagency warnings with the FBI and Department of Justice on heightened readiness for any efforts to bypass the judicial directive. As pressure builds, the story has transformed from political drama to a genuine authority crisis where internal abandonment speeds the collapse. The atmosphere in Washington is heavy with expectation as what started as a legal defeat transforms into complete disorder on Capitol Hill. This action sets in motion a series of enforcement processes that were previously considered impossible in this situation. With the Supreme Court's rejection of the emergency delay now confirmed, the contempt actions against Trump are no longer theoretical. They are legally mandated. The lower court judge, already documented expressing impatience with continuous postponements, now has authorization to impose financial penalties, freeze holdings, or even issue an arrest order if resistance continues past the 48-hour deadline specified in today's decision. Potential outcomes now involve confiscation of remaining disputed sensitive materials, immediate assignment to federal enforcement officers for transport if Trump refuses appearance, and a formal revocation process for any remaining security access or consulting positions connected to government agreements. Each action now automatically triggers the next through legal requirement and preset mechanisms. Inability to deliver documents by tomorrow morning automatically escalates to a countrywide warrant, engaging U.S. Marshal Service resources already stationed in the Washington metropolitan region. In private sessions, the coordination is disturbingly efficient. Government bodies are operating in near total silence and velocity, indicating a collective understanding that opposition is diminishing and that continued defiance might escalate into direct confrontation. The strategic phase has clearly transitioned to containment and separation, with White House personnel, many who worked under several administrations, now treating the current occupant of the guest area as the main threat concern. Their goal seems twofold: manage the story by restricting Trump's ability to access unsecured communication devices and outside contacts, and prevent departure, whether literal or symbolic, by maintaining his physical presence until federal officials can take custody if directed. Individuals familiar with the Internal Crisis Handbook characterize the shutdown as Level 3 activation, designated for situations where executive branch staff believe someone is trying to undermine lawful procedure from inside federal grounds. The choice to seal sections was not spontaneous. It came after a quick evaluation that Trump's shouted instructions to staff, including requests to reach sympathetic military contacts or gather crowds outside, entered territory that required mandatory notification to the Attorney General's crisis hotline. This indicates not merely alarm, but a deliberate assessment that the former president's power, once a political advantage, has transformed into a clear and immediate danger to institutional legitimacy. In the restricted command center, now functioning on closed floors, senior authorities are quietly preparing communications for distribution once containment is confirmed, stressing that the actions protect both the facility and the constitutional framework. The velocity of this reaction from court decision to complete shutdown in less than 6 hours suggests existing backup planning, probably revised after earlier legal setbacks. What becomes apparent is an image of a governmental system that quietly anticipated this precise moment, operating with the accuracy of machinery that no longer trusts its previous controller. Anticipate the coming hours to be marked by public resistance declarations, urgent legal submissions, and opposing directives that might drive the crisis toward complete rupture. Trump is reportedly already trying to overcome the communication restriction, allegedly using smuggled equipment to publish incomplete messages on Truth Social, claiming staff betrayal and demanding immediate supporter mobilization to encircle the White House boundary. Those posts, though delayed and heavily filtered by platform systems, are being spread by devoted influencers who portray the shutdown as an ongoing establishment takeover. Urgent legal filings are overwhelming the D.C. Circuit Appeals Court, with Trump's legal representatives submitting a desperate motion for emergency intervention, asserting the staff action breaches governmental balance and constitutes illegal confinement of a former president. Opposing directives are being prepared by supportive legislators, including proposed resolutions from House Freedom Caucus participants requesting an immediate congressional inquiry into the White House personnel's rebellion. Meanwhile, international responses are starting to emerge. European governments have released careful statements encouraging respect for American judicial independence, while government-controlled media in Russia and China are already presenting the developments as evidence of irreversible American deterioration. The power confrontation has conclusively moved from politics to enforcement, from discussion to procedure, from loyalty to basic survival. What previously occurred on television panels and campaign events is now controlled by court administrators, federal operatives, and security boundaries. Trump's close circle is fragmenting further. Multiple longtime counselors have been seen departing the facility under escort, avoiding comment as they walk past the media group still positioned blocks distant behind barriers. Followers trying to assemble near Lafayette Square are encountering rapidly growing police formations, an indication that Washington officials expect crowd intensification. Within the shutdown area, the environment is characterized as strained but organized, with personnel rotating in brief periods to sustain alertness. The escalation stage presents genuine danger of error. A single unauthorized effort to breach entry or an impulsive public declaration from Trump might activate the deployment of extra federal capabilities, converting a contained crisis into a broadcast demonstration of constitutional emergency. Financial markets are already responding. Contracts on significant indexes are declining as investors calculate uncertainty surrounding executive branch reliability. The brief opportunity for reduction is vanishing quickly, with every passing moment tightening the legal constraint and expanding the political separation. What originated as a courtroom loss has grown into a live examination of whether institutional systems can still limit a personality who previously commanded them. Global organizations are now observing with intense focus as the drama within the White House develops in current time. NATO headquarters in Brussels organized an impromptu virtual crisis meeting shortly after midnight Eastern, with defense leaders from important member nations conveying serious worry over the possible degradation of American command and oversight dependability. High-ranking diplomats characterized the shutdown not simply as a domestic political event, but as a potential indicator of instability that might spread across transatlantic security arrangements. One European representative speaking confidentially observed that when the globe's strongest military has its former leader physically restricted by his own personnel, every presumption about American consistency is questioned. Comparable anxiety is expanding through the United Nations Security Council passages where representatives from France, the United Kingdom, and even traditionally neutral nations have privately distributed discussion materials highlighting the necessity for Washington to prove that its constitutional systems remain operational. China's government media, meanwhile, has seized the opportunity. Xinhua and CGTN are broadcasting continuous sequences of historical footage from January 6th, placed alongside current images of the surrounded White House boundary, presenting the situation as undeniable proof of terminal deterioration in American democracy. Russian media outlets are reinforcing the story, with RT and Sputnik analysts enthusiastically forecasting that the crisis will speed the transition toward a multipolar global structure. In the Middle East, Israeli authorities are quietly examining backup strategies for American military assistance in the territory, while Saudi and Emirati representatives have contacted several congressional offices, requesting confirmation that policy stability will not be interrupted. The economic sphere is responding with immediate intensity. When the initial reliable information of the shutdown reached trading platforms, Dow Jones contracts dropped more than 850 points in the limited overnight trading. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ composites experienced similar movements, eliminating roughly 2.1% of market value within minutes. Foreign exchange specialists moved forcefully against the American dollar. The euro rose above 114. The yen gained strength to positions not observed since early 2024. And developing market currencies already experiencing stress experienced sharp declines. Investment funds with substantial commitment to American stocks initiated position liquidation, while computerized systems activated automatic sell orders that intensified the fluctuation. Goldman Sachs distributed an after-hours investor communication titled U.S. Governance Risk Premium, cautioning that prolonged uncertainty surrounding executive branch operations might add 50 to 75 basis points to extended Treasury yields and reduce up to 1.2% from anticipated GDP expansion for the present quarter. Raw material markets experienced impact. Petroleum contracts descended below $68 per barrel on concerns that political paralysis could weaken implementation of sanction systems, while gold jumped past $2,700 per ounce as a traditional safety investment reaction. Digital currency platforms observed Bitcoin fall nearly 9% before partial stabilization, demonstrating once more how rapidly macro-political disruptions transmit into virtual asset categories. Reputation harm to fundamental American institutions is already quantifiable and severe. The American legal framework, historically considered a worldwide benchmark for judicial independence, now encounters criticism from both domestic populists and international skeptics of selective application or alternatively weaponization against political personalities. Confidence surveys performed in current time by research organizations reveal a significant decline in public trust in the federal courts, especially among independent electors who previously regarded the judiciary as a stabilizing influence. Executive power itself seems reduced in the perception of both partners and opponents. The vision of a former president confined by his own previous employees diminishes the impression of absolute authority that previously characterized the Oval Office. This symbolic break carries tangible diplomatic expenses. Multiple bilateral trade discussions, including vital semiconductor supply network agreements with Taiwan and South Korea, have been discreetly suspended, awaiting clarification on who precisely represents American policy in the approaching days. Intelligence exchange channels with Five Eyes associates are reportedly functioning at decreased capacity as coordination officers anticipate formal guarantees that authority structures remain functional. Danger of diplomatic separation is no longer abstract. The United Kingdom's Foreign Office issued a precisely worded communication at 1:17 a.m. London time, requesting swift and clear resolution consistent with American constitutional standards, a statement broadly understood as courteous but definite concern. Germany's chancellor published a single-sentence post in both German and English. Democracy requires institutions to function even under stress. France, customarily more straightforward, had its representative to Washington present a formal expression to the State Department, conveying expectation that the circumstances would not damage the capacity of the United States to fulfill its partnership responsibilities. In Asia, Japan's chief cabinet official assembled an emergency session of the National Security Council, while Australia's Prime Minister publicly restated Canberra's steadfast dedication to the ANZUS Treaty, phrasing that subtly emphasizes concern about American dependability. Even India, typically reserved in its assessment on American internal matters, saw its External Affairs Ministry release an uncommon direct statement that stability in Washington remains crucial for worldwide security framework. These communications, considered collectively, form a pattern of allied concern that has not been experienced at this intensity since the concluding period of the Nixon administration. Security repositioning is already apparent on several fronts. The Pentagon positioned selected combat commands on increased vigilance condition, though authorities maintain the action is precautionary instead of responsive. U.S. European Command reportedly elevated monitoring flights over the Baltic territory, while Indo-Pacific Command discreetly repositioned a carrier battle group nearer to the Taiwan Strait. At domestic military facilities, base leaders received revised force security guidance highlighting vigilance against domestic disorder overflow. The Department of Homeland Security initiated regional coordination centers in the National Capital Region, working with D.C. Metro Police and Virginia and Maryland state officials to observe potential large-scale protests. Satellite observation specialists noticed heightened activity at Joint Base Andrews, including the positioning of extra C-32 aircraft, the military adaptation of the Boeing 757 frequently utilized for VIP movement, indicating preparations for potential high-level evacuations or detainee transfers if the circumstances worsen additionally. This is no longer a narrative limited to one person or even one political group. It has evolved into a current high-stakes test of whether the American constitutional structure possesses adequate strength to restrain a compelling personality who previously exercised and still maintains remarkable personal devotion. The shutdown of White House sections is not simply a protection method. It is a tangible demonstration of the instant when institutional self-protection superseded personal faithfulness. Results now reduced to 3 severe possibilities: systematic enforcement through the gathered force of judicial and law enforcement systems, a cascading breakdown of the political foundation that elevated and shielded that person, or an extraordinary historical confrontation that compels every governmental branch and potentially the citizenry itself into selecting allegiances in current time. Following this instant, nothing reverts to previous conditions. The precedent has been established. A former president can be physically separated within the exact facility that represents ultimate executive authority. The mental obstacle has been crossed, and subsequent holders of high position, regardless of political affiliation, will function under the reality of that circumstance. Confidence among political leadership has broken beyond repair. Financial supporters, strategists, and elected representatives who previously assessed danger through the perspective of faithfulness now reconsider through the perspective of legal vulnerability and personal responsibility. The national discussion, already divided, will solidify further as each faction asserts confirmation or conspiracy, depending on the ultimate resolution of the emergency. The circumstances are now beyond reversal, moving toward conclusion at a velocity few expected even 12 hours earlier. Morning is arriving over Washington, yet the Capitol persists in an abnormal stillness interrupted by the quiet sound of power generators, the static of police communication devices, and the far-off noise of increasing crowds restrained by metal boundaries. Within the shut-down executive quarters, time has decelerated to the pace of personnel rotations and quiet conferences. Beyond, the globe observes, anticipates, and adjusts its perceptions of American authority. Whatever materializes when the entrances ultimately reopen, whether systematic transfer to federal officials, resistant declarations, or something considerably more turbulent, the nation that awakens in the morning will not be the identical one that retired the previous night. The examination is no longer theoretical. It is present, it is immediate, and it is being determined section by sealed section in the most identifiable structure on the planet.